From Robin Hood, Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster to a headless horseman. The UK has an abundance of ghosts and myths and legends. Here are the stories from some of the UK's most haunted woods and forests. For hundreds of years, locals would stay well away from Ballybolly Forest. Its history is full of sacrifices, kidnappings and murders. The locals would warn visitors not to enter the forest because it was linked to a number of people's disappearances. Since the 15th century, figures have been seen moving around in the shadows, believed to be watching passers-by or stalk anyone who dares enter. People who were brave enough to explore the forest have reported hearing dim chanting in all areas, but as they ventured deeper they saw trees smothered with blood, black smoke covering the ground, and could hear human screams. In 1997, two people were walking through the forest. They hadn't gotten very far when they started hearing flapping sounds. Thinking it was a bird, they continued to go deeper into the forest. They continued to hear the flapping noise and realized that it was following them. Suddenly they started to hear a woman moaning somewhere in the distance, and that's when they started to feel nervous. The two people thought that the woman might need help, and went in the direction that the sounds were coming from. When they finally reached the place they believed it was coming from, the noises suddenly stopped. Then out of nowhere they heard a blood-curdling scream from directly behind them. The two of them ran as fast as they could. As they ran, they looked behind them and saw four hooded figures in brown ragged robes watching them from where they had just been standing just seconds ago. Epping Forest in Essex has a fascinating history that goes back as far as the Iron Age. There are stories of Roman battles, Norman invaders, and notorious highwaymen. One of the most famous highwaymen was Dick Turpin, and he used a cave in the High Beach area as a hideout for many years. Because the forest is not that far from London, it has been used by murderers as a place to bury their victims. People have reported seeing a man wearing a tricorn hat and cape on a black horse, a headless biker, an apparition of a horse-drawn carriage, a spirit run in front of vehicles, a ghost of a young girl, and a headless horseman. But that's not the end of it. At Hangman's Hill, people have reported an apparition of a man in the wooded area. Screams, and if you leave your car in neutral on the hill, it will appear to roll up the hill towards the tree where people were hanged. Because of all of the different paranormal activity, Epping Forest is believed to be the UK's most haunted forest.
Dying Woods is also known as the Screaming Woods, and is located 2.3 miles from Pluckley, so it's no surprise that the wood has a few ghost stories, considering that Pluckley is the UK's most haunted village. Piercing screams can be heard coming from the wood, and people can often hear footsteps and whispering, as well as seeing black shadow figures while walking in the wood. In 1948, just a few days before Bonfire Night, 20 bodies were found in the middle of the forest, with over half of them being children. Locals claim they saw lights in the forest on Halloween, which is believed to be the night of the massacre. The strange thing was that no cause of death could be determined, and the investigation only lasted a couple of weeks. In the end, a verdict of carbon monoxide poisoning was ruled. In 1964, a private investigator reopened the investigation, because not everyone believed it was carbon monoxide. Unfortunately, the investigation ended with his death. This wasn't the only strange mystery linked to the woods. In 1998, on the same night, 4 people disappeared from the woods. Again, locals reported seeing strange lights in the woods. An investigation followed but ended within a month, and none of the 4 people were ever found.
Many people have described Wistman Wood as the most haunted place on Dartmoor. It is believed that it was a sacred grove of the Druids, and that this was where they held their pagan rituals. Locals never venture too close to the wood once the sun goes down, because they believe that the heinous denizens of the wood stalk the moor, in search of their next victim. There is also a pack of hell hounds called the wished hounds, which live at the Druid's stone in the wood. Locals describe them as huge black dogs with blood-red eyes and large yellow fangs. Legend says that these huge beasts hunt the moors at night, searching for lost souls and unsuspecting travelers. It depends on which part of the moor you're on, but it's said that they are led by either the devil or the ancient spirit of Dartmoor. There is even a ghost of a little dog called Jumbo. Nobody knows how he died, but they think he was bitten by an adder. People often see him running between the stones hunting for rabbits.
Cannock Chase is located in the heart of Staffordshire. With its natural beauty, it's no wonder why people want to visit this amazing place. But unfortunately, not all is what it seems. For hundreds of years, visitors have reported seeing ghosts, UFOs, pigman, werewolves, and even Bigfoot within the forest. But the most terrifying are reports of a black-eyed girl. One of the most chilling stories about the black-eyed girl came from a young couple. Here is their story. In the summer of 2021, the young couple thought it would be a great idea to go camping at Cannock Chase. They had been walking for a while before they finally found a good spot for their tent. It was already quite late by the time they had put up their tent and collected wood for their fire. They spent the rest of the evening talking and roasting marshmallows before going to bed. It was around midnight when the couple was woken up by the sounds of something walking around their tent. At first they thought it was just a deer or fox, but as they continued to listen, they realized they could only hear footsteps and not any other sounds animals usually make. After a few minutes, they decided to open their tent and have a look. As soon as they did, they heard the unmistakable sound of a young child giggling. Scared, they turned on their torch to see if they could see what had made the sound. The young man saw it first, something running from tree to tree and hiding behind tree trunks, then peeking out to look at the couple. As they stood and watched it, the child stepped out from behind a tree and stood right in front of them. The young woman was terrified. She had heard stories about black-eyed children, but wasn't completely convinced they were real until that moment. As it stood in front of them, the giggling started getting louder and louder. Then she bent down as if sorting out her shoes, stood back up and ran back into the trees. The couple were absolutely terrified, but knew they had no choice but to stay until morning. They got back into their tent, but as you can imagine, didn't get any sleep. The next morning, as they packed up their things at 7 a.m., they saw piles of stones evenly spaced around their tent and strange objects that looked a bit like dream catchers hanging in the trees. When they were done, they quickly made their way along the trail towards the car. Suddenly, the young woman spotted the black-eyed girl peeking out from behind a nearby tree and screamed. Her boyfriend shouted at it to leave them alone before they both ran the rest of the way and made it safely back to the car.